can remember, we actually forget much, much more. And so supporting memory is really helpful. And then once I understand the interface, I need to be able to interact with it. I need to be able to do things. And doing involves control of motor function in some way. Well, what if we want to take this further? And we want to talk about not just how people think about things and how people learn something, but the kind of unconscious learning where you're paying attention to one thing and learning about it, and then you realize that you now understand something else as well. And what about that thing that motivates you or helps you to move toward a particular action, makes you want to do it? And what about arousal levels? Arousal is not just the difference between being asleep and awake, but it's also the difference between being bored and being excited about something and really wanting to engage with it. And the last little piece of that is our emotions, how we feel about things. Are we frightened? Are we confused? Are we happy? Are we sad? All of those things determine whether or not we will pay attention to something, and it will determine what kinds of decisions we will make about it. So here's a kind of an example of paying attention to this. So let's say you're going to have a conference, and the conference is for people who are marketers, who are people who are trying to persuade folks to do things. So on the left-hand side, we've got some images, and we've got, us, we're running towards something, looks really active. And then we've got them. And well, other conferences, they're not much. They're just a cockfight. They're just a bunch of chickens beating each other up. So here is a company that used one approach, 1 year, those engaging images. But HFI came in and did some research. And the research suggested that this wasn't necessarily what was important to people, and this wasn't necessarily how they saw marketing conferences as a cockfight. And it just didn't make sense to people. It just wasn't working. New design, a design that basically points out that our conference is different than all the other conferences. The difference between these two designs was an 87% increase in people who registered for the conference. In other words, this new design, as simple as it was, without all of those colorful images, made people want to come to the conference. So here's some advertising. AAA is the American Automobile Association, and they basically sell insurance, and they do travel information, and they have people that will, if you get a flat tire, they'll come and fix your tire for you, and you pay a yearly membership to get this. So here is their website to begin with. It basically says, here are your benefits. And we have 3 levels of membership, a basic, a plus, and a plus RV. That's for your recreational vehicle. Well, what about if instead of telling you, well, you can pay us 3 different amounts of money, what about saying, here's what you're going to get for your money. If your car's broken down, we're going to help you fix it or tow it to a mechanic. If your battery's dead, we're going to jumpstart your car. If you get a flat tire, we'll change your tire for you. If you're out of fuel, we'll bring you at least a gallon of gas. And you get all these discounts at all these different people and organizations. And here is how valuable this thing is, not just what are the 3 different kinds you can get. Here's the difference in how many people decided to become members. Twice as many people looking at this one that's basically saying, here's we are, and we've got multiple levels, and one saying, here's all the benefits for you. Twice as many people thought this looked interesting enough to start considering a membership. 17% more people wanted to have a membership. Yeah, that's $214,000. That's a lot of money in 1 month. So how do you get people to do these things that you want them to do? Most important, they have to trust you. And they trust you because you are honest. You have some knowledge or expertise about the thing that you're providing or selling. And you work hard to make sure that people have and get what they expect and what they need from your business. That credibility is absolutely essential. If you don't have that, as far as people are concerned, it could just be spam. It could be something fake that's just trying to steal information from me or steal money from me. Now, this is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. This is basically the government agency for dealing with things like COVID. It looks very governmental. It's very simple. It looks very straightforward. Here's the information. But this happens to be the page on information on quitting smoking. It looks like it probably has that credibility, but it's not really persuasive. You see, trust is kind of a basic thing you have to have. If people don't trust you, they're not going to look any further. But if they trust you because they see something, and it might be this has an indication that's a government website, and they trust it because it's a government website. You don't necessarily need to get more things and more things and more things that determine trust. Lots of times what organizations do to build trust is they'll put pictures of famous people with the idea of, well, if this person thinks that this is okay, it must be okay. And actually, that helps. That helps. Another thing that helps is if people know something about products or the services or whatever it is that you're trying to sell, and you give them information that is stuff that they already believe is true, they're more likely to trust you than if you give them some outrageous information and they go, oh, that can't possibly be true. So trust is really important. Well, what about this emotion stuff? Now, here's some research that was done quite a while ago, 1977, but it has an interesting piece of information in it. People were given, one at a time, samples of women's stockings. And they were given one, feel it. What do you think? Okay, here's the second one. Take a look at it. Here's the third one. Take a look at it. Fourth one, take a look at it. Which do you think is the best pair of stockings? Okay. Now, I'm going to tell you something about the stockings. They were all the same stocking. People thought they were getting different ones, but they were basically getting the same stocking 4 times, which means that what should happen is people should think that each one of these is equally likely to be the best. But that's not what happened. 12% picked the first one, 17% the second, 31% the third, and 40%, close to half of the people, picked the last one, even though they were all the same. When asked, why did you pick that one? No matter which one it was, they said, oh, very well knit, beautifully knit, very sheer. And look how stretchy it is. And they use these same kinds of descriptors no matter which one they said was better. One of the lessons here is, if you ask people what is good, what is better, in fact, if you ask them a lot of things, sometimes what they tell you isn't the truth. Now, I'm not saying that people intentionally lie, but maybe people actually, it was more a matter of they remembered more about that last pair of stockings, or maybe they were looking at it more carefully than the other ones, and that's why they picked it. But they weren't really remembering all those different pairs and comparing them. And so even though they could tell you reasons why it was good, they were basically saying things that they didn't know. Well, what kinds of emotional things are involved? Yeah, if you really want to get people interested in something, there are 3 things that we know really work. Scare them because something is dangerous. Get them to think, ooh, that's associated with some people that I think are really lovely, or associated with food. Yeah. This is because the parts of the brain that evaluate those things are very primitive. They don't think about things very well, but they really push towards our making decisions, because these are things that really do determine whether or not we survive. Yeah. So, yeah, if you use those things, you can get emotions involved. So here's an ad for cat food. And it's a little bit, my cat might hunt mice, but my cat doesn't hunt gazelles or antelope or whatever this larger beast is. But it just seems so impossible that it seems right. It seems like, yeah, this cat really wants food that a cat would want, that a cat would hunt for, and it makes it more memorable. So now it gets down to persuasion. What kinds of things really do persuade people? Yeah, let's look at a couple of examples. Here's something that doesn't work, and yet it's something we do all the time, is we basically tell people the facts. We tell them the truth. In the United States, there are products that are manufactured and sold by big companies, and they do lots of advertising. One of them is Pepto-Bismol. It's the stuff on the right, and it's a pink liquid to settle your stomach. And then there are products that are called generic products, which Basically, the generic product is also pink. It also has wintergreen flavoring, and it also has the same chemicals in it that settle your stomach. So they're pretty much the same thing. But look at the prices. You don't need to know how much a dollar is to know that $2.99 is less than $6.49 by less than half. In other words, this doesn't cost anywhere near as much as the Pepto-Bismol from the big company, even though it's basically the same thing. So we can tell people the facts. These two things are equivalent. They are the same. They do the same thing. One is as good as the other. And people are more likely to buy Pepto-Bismol, the brand one, than they are the one that just has the same stuff, but it doesn't have the advertised label. In other words, not only do giving people the facts, it doesn't always work, but advertising does. Here's something else that works pretty well. Saving money. Look at this. 50% off on deposits, room upgrades free. Oh boy, I can go on a cruise and it's going to be much less expensive. I can even get a better room free if they have one available. Guess what? This is the kind of thing that will make people decide to go with this cruise rather than maybe one from another company. But there's a problem here. Yeah. And the problem is that if you keep giving people discounts, if you give people things for free, if you always have big sales, one thing that happens is people think your product isn't as good because, hey, you can give it away for free or you can give it away for less money. And then the other thing is when somebody else comes along and they sell it for less money than you're selling it, all of a sudden, people are no longer going to go with your brand. They're not only always going to buy your product, they're always going to buy the cheap one. And so you basically put yourself in a situation where you have to cut your price and then the other company cuts theirs, and you have to cut your price and the other company cuts theirs. Eventually, neither one of you are making any money, even though you're selling the product. Yeah, that idea of using discounts is not a good way to sell things. So what is a good idea to persuade people? What is a good way to sell something? What is a good way to convince something that who you are or what you do is better than everybody else? If you give them a discount, if you give them two for the price of one, if you give them something extra, it doesn't work very well, and it's going to cost your company money. But if you give them control over things, give them power, if you give them the ability to do something or get something or have something, access to things, or if you give them status, that's why that famous person works. Is you can imagine yourself being that person and having all of the things that you have when you're the famous person, all of the status. It may not cost you as much, but it may be much more powerful. I'll give you a couple of examples of things. that we talk about in the classes. Now, a lot of the research that we talk about, particularly in the persuasion classes, really is based on research that was done either in the United States or in other Western countries. And I'm not sure it's going to work everywhere in the world. But there are some things that are about culture and learning and your experience. And there are some things that are about what you do as a human being. They're kind of built into all of us. And so we're going to look at using one of those kind of built-in things. Most human beings think that beauty is associated with symmetry, with the idea that one side of your face is basically just the opposite, but it's the same as the other. And so these two faces basically took faces of a whole bunch of men and had people judge how attractive is this guy, and then made a composite face, and they just ended up with two of them based on what the guys looked like that they started with. If you're shown things that are equally attractive, so the research found that these two men were equally attractive to people. 50% of the people think, yeah, Tom would be a good person to get to know or to date, or he's the nice, beautiful person. 50% said it was Jerry. In other words, these are equal. What happens if we now give you a choice between three people? We're going to take that image of Jerry and we're going to make him asymmetrical. We're going to kind of twist his nose a little bit and make his jaw kind of different on one side. Now, he really doesn't look that bad, but he looks uglier than the Jerry on the far right. We sometimes call this an ugly Jerry. What happens is, in this situation, the comparison of Tom to Jerry is difficult because they're so much alike. They're equally attractive. The comparison of Jerry to Jerry, where we've got ugly Jerry and attractive Jerry, that's easy. I want Jerry. I don't want ugly Jerry. All of a sudden now we pick the pretty version that we can compare with an ugly Jerry. Now, you probably are not selling people. You're probably not selling dates with people. So let's look at an ugly Jerry in magazine descriptions. So here is the online subscription. It's inexpensive relatively to here. I can get the print and the online subscription, but it costs quite a bit more. They are not equal. The inexpensive one, remember, people will buy the cheap one. But if somebody makes it cheaper, they're going to buy the other guy's cheap one, right? So we find out that most people buy the inexpensive one. Okay, now we're going to put in an ugly Jerry. So we're going to take print and web subscription, and we're going to put in just a print subscription, and we're going to make it the same price as the print and web. So now we've got the ugly Jerry, the subscription that's just as costly, but I don't get the online version. What's going to happen? Now almost everybody doesn't want the ugly Jerry, so they get the good-looking Jerry. Yeah, that's an ugly Jerry. It's a persuasion technique. What kinds of consequences does an ugly Jerry have? let's say you go to your doctor and your doctor says, you really need surgery. You need a new hip joint. But maybe you can take some medication for the pain and you'll be fine for a while. That's the choice that the doctor is making in terms of what to recommend to you. If there's only one medication available, and so the doctor says, well, it's either medication or surgery, let's look at how many doctors recommend the thing that isn't going to hurt quite as much or be as expensive versus an expensive and painful surgery. Almost 3/4 of them recommend, let's try the medication first. But let's say there are 2 medications available. They work a little differently, but they both will relieve the pain. Now, half of them recommend medication, a little more than half. But that means that a good percentage of these folks are now recommending surgery when medication probably would be enough. Because they had to make, this is a difficult decision between which medication is better. So it's medication versus hip. So here's the ugly Jerry, right? Oh, no, they're recommending this right now. This is the 2 things I'm recommending, medication or surgery. Now this is like Tom versus Jerry. Now this becomes a choice they have to make. Yeah. You see, somewhere deep down inside, when we make decisions, we've got to think things through. And sometimes it's pretty obvious. It's a pretty easy thing to think about. And sometimes the reason that that's really easy to think about is because our biology is all ready to think that way. So, yeah, here's another little example for you. So here we have a baby turkey. And so when baby turkeys make little peeping sounds, they go beep, 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 beep. And the adult turkeys, then when they hear that sound, they go and they feed the baby. So what the scientists did here is they took an animal that eats turkeys. And it could be a ferret or a muskrat or whatever you have around that eats birds. And turkeys tend to be really scared of animals like that. In fact, they're scared of them. Sometimes they don't even have to learn how to be scared of them. They took a stuffed version of one of those animals and they put a little recorder in it that made it sound like it was a baby turkey. So now this predator is going beep, 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 beep. And do you know what the turkeys did? Instead of running away or avoiding or pecking at this monster who could eat them, they fed it because it peeped like a baby turkey. As humans, we're kind of like that. If something looks like a baby and sounds like a baby, particularly if it sounds like a baby in distress, a baby that's crying, we try to make the crying stop. We feed it, we make it, keep it warm, cuddle it. We do things basically to take care of baby anythings. Baby turkeys, baby humans, baby puppies, kitties. Yeah. You see, we're good at thinking about things and making decisions, but there are some kinds of things that we don't necessarily do things that make a lot of sense. Keep in mind that survival is a big deal for human beings. So if something might make it so that we don't survive, like a really horrible thing happens, like a satellite falls on our car when it's the only one in the parking lot, we get scared. And we might buy insurance because that horrible thing might happen to me. And yet, most of the time it doesn't. Yeah. Okay. So that's some things that have to do with our biology that change how we see things, and so they persuade us to take certain actions. What about situations where we kind of play with people's emotions and we take negative information or positive information and present it differently? So let's say you believe that eating meat with lots of fat in it is not good for you. I'm not sure this is true, but let's say that's true. So now we're going to have 2 packages of meat, and one's going to have a sticker, and it's going to say like 75% lean, or in this case, 90% lean, or it's going to say 25% fat. Now, for those of you who are good with numbers, you look at that and you say, yeah, but that's the same thing. It either has 75% lean and 25%, or then the other 25% has to be fat. Yeah. So if you are told the survival rate for a medical procedure versus how likely you are to die from the procedure, yeah, you're going to listen to the thing, oh, yeah, survival, that's a good thing. I think about that differently. I get scared when you tell me I might die, even though it's very unlikely. People do this all the time. You know, it's not global warming, it's climate change. It's not drilling for oil, it's exploring for energy. We're not wiretapping you, we're doing electronic intercepts. Yeah. Basically, the understanding of that was used by this hot dog stand. And you can tell from the way it looks in that black and white picture, this was a long time ago. This was a hot dog stand on the beach. 5-cent hamburgers and hot dogs. Very inexpensive, less expensive than anybody else on the beach. Nobody was buying them. So what the owner did is, across the street there was a hospital. And he went to the hospital and he said, we're going to give a discount for doctors and nurses who come over and who can, you know, they've got their doctor and nurse clothes on so people can see their doctors and nurses at the hospital. We'll give you food for free or for less. This is different than putting it on sale. This was when people saw the doctors and nurses going there. Well, doctors and nurses must know good food. And so they thought, this is good food. Those are good hot dogs. And Nathan's is now basically a national brand. You can find it in most grocery stores in the United States, and it's still around. because they convinced people that they had good food because these health experts were eating it. One more quick example. Many of you might live in a country where you don't tip a waiter in a restaurant. But a lot of the research done in the United States basically uses wait staff and tips because it's an easy way to measure how people feel about their meal. So here's a situation where you go, you eat your meal. At the end of the meal, when the waiter brings you the tip, he also brings you a free piece of candy. What happened was then basically the tip that people gave was 3.3% better than the waiters who didn't give their customers a piece of candy. Oh, that's a little bit. What if you give them 2 pieces of candy? Now it goes up to 14% more. Now this last one's interesting. So the waiter comes up and he gives you your bill and he gives you a piece of candy. He starts to walk away and he says, "Oh, you folks have been so nice. Here's an extra piece of candy." Let's see what happens. Almost doubles. In other words, you can change people's behavior. In the HFI classes, we not only teach about those principles and how to apply them in different contexts, but we also teach how to interview people and explore what they really feel about things, what their emotions are, which is something that sometimes we don't know about our customers or our clients. And what kinds of things do they believe about our product or our service? That kind of information can tell you things that maybe you didn't know, and now you can understand and prepare things that are better, both for your customers, because they're going to be happier about things, and for you, because you're likely to have a better business. So we put together maps that basically look at the things that are driving people to, for example, buy your product. In this case, it's shopping for clothes, and things that are getting in the way. And that should lead you to some good things.